All right, in this lesson, we're going to learn about the important WordPress action lifecycle. Now, the action lifecycle refers to the order and relationship of do action calls within WordPress. We looked through the WordPress code and found a bunch of instances where do action occurred, but we didn't see the specific order in which they were called. Now, there are two common life cycles. There's the front end life cycle and the admin area life cycle. And these, in large part, cause different actions to occur. Some that are meant for building out a theme or the front end, and some that are meant specifically for building out the back end. However, you will see some overlap and similarities between the two. In the WordPress Codex, there's a great page referred to as the action reference. And what it has is two major sections that we're going to look at, which are the actions that run during a typical request and actions that run during an admin page request. Now, depending on what plugins or configurations are set up, these may vary, but they are a good general starting point for us to look at. If we come down and look at these, we could see the first thing is must-use plugins are loaded. So before anything else happens in WordPress, these are loaded. Then we have the taxonomy fired up, followed behind with registered post types, so setting up the post and page post types, making sure that plugins are loaded. We have some sanitization and setup going on, and then text domain for translation. From there, we get into some stuff setting up the theme. We have some authentication things happening, and then an initialization function. Now, it's important to remember if you're coming from a programming background where init was the first thing kicked off, initialize doesn't happen until all of these other things happen first. And then we have widgets init being triggered, register sidebar, sidebar widgets, any default scripts and styles. And then if the admin bar needs to be initialized, that's triggered in, WordPress loading, more stuff happening, another action hook with WP where a lot of the WordPress objects or object is set up. Then we get into something we'll look at later, which is template redirect. So if you want to redirect to another page, it's going to happen before all of the following things. Our get header, our scripts are enqueued. So if you remember enqueuing our scripts and our CSS and our JavaScript, this is the point in the WordPress runtime on the front end where that is called. We have WP head, which we looked at, the admin version of in the last lesson, and the loop start, the post, all of these things that should begin to kind of make sense, right? We know what the loop is, we know what a post is, so it isn't hard to figure out or imagine that somewhere in there there's a do action called the post, and these things are going to be made available either to WordPress itself or to other developers. WP footer, things hooking in there, and then finally shutdown. So at this point, you could get in one last bit of code before WordPress is done and your page is fully loaded. Now, after that, we have actions run during an admin page request. So if you're doing anything on the back end of WordPress, it's going to execute a slightly different set of code. However, you'll notice some things are the same. We have Moot plugins being loaded, the taxonomy, the registered post type, the plugins, and in fact, a lot of this, if you compare them, are the exact same as before. However, as we come down, we begin to see things like admin menu, admin init, and admin enqueue scripts, which we saw on the back end in one of the previous lessons, etc., etc. So a lot of these you'll notice are specific to the admin, but then we still have some stuff like if the post is available, that hook would be the same on the admin loading page and on the front end. You'll notice here, though, that shutdown is not the final thing in this case. We have one last thing that could happen for customizing the admin dashboard. So as we scroll down after these, you could see a rough categorization of different types, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that we could just scroll at a high level here. I'm going to encourage you to come back to this later on, but you could see taxonomy and terms, comment hooks, and the reason a lot of these are red is that they don't have documentation here. A lot of the documentation is being shifted over to developer.wordpress.org, but this page doesn't yet exist, so this is still a good one in the codex. We could see blog roll actions, feed actions, template actions, administrative actions, all categorized. So just with this one page, we have quite a lot to read through and work through. And I want to encourage you at this point. I know you just spent some time digging through WordPress core. Now we're going to shift gears and start digging through WordPress documentation more and taking a look and trying to understand how all those things that we just saw in some sort of random order in different files now begins to take form in the order of how these actions happen. Now, I'll say here in closing that in addition to these resources, we can on any given page in WordPress use either some code or a plugin to tell us specifically what actions were called and what custom functions were hooked into those actions. So really take the time to look over this. Again, you don't have to understand everything, but you should get a general vibe, and some things may begin to get more clear about, oh, okay, so this is what's going on here and this is how it's loading. It should make sense. You should see that WordPress is an action-based system and that things are being hooked in different orders, and then scroll through the bottom of that page and look at all of the different names. And again, just being exposed to them a few times early on is really helpful because you'll remember in the back of your mind, oh yeah, that's there, when the time comes up to really use it. So you don't need to know how to do all this now. You're just familiarizing yourself with what hooks are available in WordPress and how these actions are configured in this different runtime scenarios. Once you got a grasp on that, we're going to go forward in the next lessons and we're going to start looking at different ways we could drill down and find out more specifics about what is going on with action hooks.